All right, hello everyone. I'd like to begin. It's time for our workshop to start. Pina coladas in hand for some of our audience members, morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. So I'd like to introduce, without further ado, our presenter, Nathan Hall. Nathan Hall is an EAP instructor and teacher, trainer for Douglas College. He is especially interested in pedagogically sound issues or uses of technology in the language classroom, and he is joining us from BC today. So without further ado, I will pull up Nathan's slides and have him get started on his presentation today, Co-Creating a Technology-Based Community Resource.
Thank you so much, Elena. First off, I want to say welcome to my home. Hope you feel comfortable. Put your feet up, relax, enjoy yourself. If you need anything, fridge is just door. And if you wouldn't mind cleaning up after yourself if you spill anything. All right. Yeah, it's kind of unusual. Sometimes you're doing an online session. You just don't get that feedback that you would with face-to-face. But I'm hoping that through this, we can have a little bit of a discussion, certainly on the chat box. If you have anything, just post on the chat box. And also, you can use the hashtag Realize15. I'll keep that over here, and I'll keep an eye on that as well, too. So whatever means you want to do that. What do I mean by co-creating a technology-based community resource? Well, this is actually a session I've given a couple of times, although it's evolved and changed over a period of time. And basically, what I'm referring to is self-access materials, mostly self-access materials, although this could be adapted for almost any situation. What I was finding was, in my classroom, I was getting a lot of students who I would give them, whether it was paper books or listening material, whatever, in the classroom. And I was finding a lot of students were either uninterested in it or it wasn't relevant for their situation. And I would try to adapt that and change that as I went along, but it was really quite difficult to maintain, even with online resources and so forth. So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to get my students involved in it. So I started asking, this is going back a little ways, I was asking some of my students for what they use, and it just kind of sparked an idea and kept things going. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at how anybody can work with their students to kind of create an environment where students are sharing things that they are finding that's helpful to them in their learning experience. And I can also, or as a teacher, we can also add to as well. And either we can kind of control either quite tightly or loosely, or we can just leave it as a free-for-all and allow students to be able to just communicate with one another in a more free environment, just depending on your situation, obviously. So first off, self-access materials. Tomlinson, 2010, refers to learners need rich exposure to the language in use. So Tomlinson, this is Brian Tomlinson, says that this rich exposure, he says, to what extent are the materials provide rich exposure to English in use? That was the question he kept posing to himself when he was going through some of his self-access materials. And this rich exposure to language in use, rich meaning various, having depth or high quality, and that was a key. To me, that was the idea of that it needed to be access to both English speakers, native speaker and non-native speaker, both in writing and listening. And I wanted them to move from being passive in this regards and just taking in the material as given them to becoming more active, involved. So that is kind of the idea behind this. The idea was to use authentic reading and listening material, but first we have to figure out what authentic really means. And authentic, basically it comes from the Greek. And it means original, genuine, or principle. The idea that it comes from one acting on his own authority or self. And so in this case here, what I was looking at was it could be material that maybe was even not necessarily 100% accurate, but it was something that they were going to see on a regular basis or hear on a regular basis. So especially if I'm having non-native speakers communicating with other non-native speakers, they have to be used to hearing the accents and hearing some of the the simple or even more common mistakes that are going to be happening. And then we can deal with that as we're going through in the classroom about how to correct those things. But I wanted them to be exposed to that so that they're used to hearing it. Yeah, the question about Tomlinson, I have a link to the article at the end, and you can check and see. Brian Tomlinson's been working a lot with materials development, and that's where a lot of this material comes from. He deals a lot with self-access material, especially. So self-access material, again, it should be really useful for development and evaluation purposes. So not just teaching them something, but also then evaluating where they are. The criteria should be unambiguous, answerable, specific, and valid. So I kind of changed that around a little bit, and I said, to be truly collaborative, users must have unfettered access to create, consume, and share content. So not only do I want them to collect things that they find, but I want them also to create things that they can share. So to break that down into the different pieces, development and evaluation. So both students and teachers. So self-evaluation, and teacher can also evaluate as well. Both formative and summative, and learning and practice. So all of those pieces need to be in balance all the time. You can't just have students working on, for example, something always for the teacher, but they should be working on things that are also for themselves, that they can see where they are and where they're going. It should be unambiguous, answerable, specific, and valid. So example, when I'm providing things, I need to make sure that my instructions are very clear on the use and the purpose, especially the purpose. Students are always asking, why are we doing this? And I want them to be understanding that there is a very purposeful reason in doing each of these things. It should be appropriate, so various levels. Again, we want students who are just working at, you have these students who always try and read stuff that's really much too advanced for them, and they get bogged down in their dictionaries and trying to understand each word and give up, to be honest. And so I try to encourage my students to try and choose stuff that's at a lower level so they can gain that fluency and continue to move up in incremental stages. So again, allowing them to choose their difficulty, though. I don't try and control it too much unless I find that a student is really getting bogged down. If a student wants to spend a lot of time at a lower level, as long as they're getting their fluency, I'm quite okay with that, because I can control the stuff that's in classes, the stuff really on their self-access. Again, going back to the different needs, so there were different validities. So there's psychological validity. So in this case here, learners' needs, goals, and pedagogical requirements. This comes from Rugdi. So I try to have them match up things that met their goals and their pedagogical requirements. So instead of me saying, this is what fits what you're trying to do, I ask them to think about what they think fits what they're trying to do and seek out things that would help them. Pedagogical validity. So again, in this case, teachers' abilities, theories, and beliefs. And then process and content validity, the thinking that underlies the materials that's there. And this is something a lot of students don't think about. And we had a situation that comes to that, which I'll address later on, but just to give you a touch on, I had students who were bringing and collecting inappropriate material, material that was having maybe questionable content or language, or there was a lot of errors in it. And so then we would just evaluate it together as a class and work together with it as a class. So I just flipped those around. That was from Rugdi. For me, it should be adaptable, so the content should be adaptable. The time involved in learning, setting up, and maintaining should be minimal at best. And content should be accessible through various means and sensitive to users' abilities and preferences. So again, I'm working with different levels of students. I have some students who are very comfortable on computers and mobile phones and tablets and those type of things, and I have some students who maybe they have never even had access to it. So in this particular case, I think that I need to find things that students are going to be able to do on their own, depending on their technological abilities as well too. So here's another thing just to mention with that. We talk a lot about availability So we talk about things like making it available on a phone and that type of thing. And some students don't have access to mobile phones. I have students that don't have any mobile phones. But they're older. They've maybe come in from a different culture, whether they're refugees or immigrants, and they just don't have access to that. So having the tools available in your classroom that students can then take that outside as well. So that could be, for example, maybe your school decides to buy a set of cheap ebooks. They're getting much cheaper now, so ebook readers. Or maybe you get yourself, you can get these really cheap little MP3 players that have video and audio playback, and they can also do video recording. And those little things, you can get them for about $20 now at various locations. And you could have a small set of those for the class. So question is where to find those. For example, I just looked just recently, you can get them at Future Shop, Best Buy, London Drugs, The Source. In Canada, those are different places where we get them, Walmart. So yeah, so it's a good question. Phones, but not having data. You can actually do it without having to have data either. So one of the things you can do is you could have a place where the students can plug in and copy, for example, MP3 files, or if they have an e-reader app on their phone, or if they don't have smartphones, some of them allow for text, and you can download text on those as well too. Especially for the listening, there's a place to be able to do that for a lot of these phones. Creating is even better, because even the cheapest phones can do video and audio recording. It may not be of the highest quality, but it's something that can be done. So again, this unfettered access to create, consume, and share content, use of various devices. So it's got to be available to all the students. Use of both online and offline material. Ability to read or listen to materials on whatever device they want. Ability to create content, and the ability to share that content with their classmates, teachers, and even better, beyond that. So they are allowed to share that, say, for example, they were creating a class blog or things like that, and allowing it to go into other classrooms and other students. The things to consider is technology, operating systems. You have a wide variety of operating systems from Windows to Mac, Android, iOS, Linux, whatever. There's a lot of things to consider there. So you have to be careful in knowing that they work on various devices. You have different technology, Flash, Java, HTML5. All of those are different forms that are not accessible on all devices. Registration, full, partial, none. So I like to work with no registration. Makes it the easiest for the students. So comment on the board here about Wi-Fi is needed. Wi-Fi is a need. We're talking about Maslow's revised hierarchy of needs. Yeah, it is, but again, the accessibility through things like the library. I got my students involved in public library stuff, so that they have access to things wherever they are. Even if they don't have it at home, they do have free access to it, usually within the school or public library or so forth. I can't even speak now. All right, here we go. The tools. These are the kind of tools I want to kind of take a look at and see the kind of things that I've been using. Digo. I'll talk a little bit more about each of these in a minute here, but Digo, allowing for a teacher account where students can email in. They can use an app on their phone if they have it, or they can use the website, and you can create groups. Digo, all of these, by the way, I have used. Some have certain things that are much better than other things, certain things that are there, certain things that are missing. I'll take you through just quickly through some of these. Edmodo, which is a place where you can have a, shall we say, a social media online with your students that's controlled by the blocked in a walled garden type of thing. It's free. It's an education account, and basically think of it like a learning management system, but more with a social media bent. Puzzle, which is another pinboard option, much like Pinterest or something like that. Padlet, popular choice with teachers, and blogs such as WordPress, which allow for comments and things like that. All of these things, students can actually add links. They can add content that they find and share with or share with the other students in the class. So Other options, you can use things like Twitter hashtags and Facebook groups. I tend to stay away from those just because of the inequality in the classroom. Some students have access to these all the time. Some don't have access to it hardly at all, and a lot of them coming from countries where they don't feel comfortable logging into these type of things. So I tend to stay away from it a little bit, although I might use hashtags for them because they can search for it without having to have an account. But again, they can't share then, so that takes away from what I was wanting to say, was to create content as well. So I'm just going to give you a link here first. This link, so I'm posting that in the chat box here. The link I just gave you is a document that allows you to click and follow all of the links that I'm about to talk about. So if you have the technology to be able to kind of maybe open up a separate browser window, or if you have maybe you have a tablet or something that you can search for some of these on the side, this allows you to be able to explore these things while I'm talking. So it's just a document that I posted there, and each of these that I'm giving you, there's going to be some sample playing area where you can actually go in and give it a try. So Diigo is the first one I want to talk about. It's basically a curated bookmarking site. It's cloud-based, and so they call it social bookmarking. It means anybody can, if they join into a group, for example, can share bookmarks with each other, or you can have a private area for yourself, or just private bookmarks for yourself. This allows you to be able to create links. You can upload PDFs, and you can also put in annotations and text and things like that. So Diigo is great for that. There's a teacher account that's available. Again, if you follow that link that I have there, there isn't, and I'll post this link to it in the chat box as well. Diigo has free teacher accounts available. Now, there's a free account, the regular account, but the teacher account, if you request a teacher account, it's also free, but allows you to create groups where students don't have to have an email address to register. So you can actually register for them, and you can create a class really easily. There's a box that comes up. You just type in all the names that you want with the passwords, and it automatically creates the class account for you. And then students can go in and they can share links with each other, upload documents. They can comment on links. They can comment on documents. It's a great way to be able to do that. The sample one that I have put together allows you to be able to play with it a little bit. And again, it's all in that document, but I'll post on the side here as well. You can log in to Diigo using Realize 2015 as your username and the password 123456. And you can actually post and try and comment and see what you like. You don't even have to, again, you don't have to do this now just because of time, but you can play with this at any time just and see if it works for you. Diigo is great. The one thing I find is it's not very visual. It's just a bunch of links and text. In some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad. It's not very stimulating. But one of the things I do like about Diigo is the tags function, allowing you to be able to add tags, and then you can do a search for things like that. So for example, I can have one link and I can have 20 tags, which means that if someone's looking for listening material, they can click on the listening tag, but if it also happens to have a vocabulary portion to it, they can click on the vocabulary tag, and that same link will appear in the vocabulary links. So you don't have to copy the link into two different places. Tags works very well for that type of thing. Yeah, the comment was about Delicious. Delicious is very similar. I like Diigo because of the teacher account with the class function. That's the big thing for me, to be able to have students be able to log in with a free account. So that's Diigo. Again, if you want to play with that on your own, by all means, there's the Realize 2015 one you can play around with and see what happens there. I want to also talk a little bit about Edmodo. Edmodo is a dream, but there's one snag that comes with Edmodo, and that is, depending on where you're at, you have to be careful about privacy functions, because it is cloud-based in the US, which means it does fall under the Patriot Act, which also means that in some places, like for example in British Columbia, Nova Scotia, there are some really strict rules about that. Now, it's not to say that you can't use it, it's to say that you can't have identifiable information there. So if you're using it for class things, you could create a class and they're just sharing links, as long as you don't have, for example, you don't use their real names or things like that. So you can create that as you want that way. There are some ways in which you can make that work. Edmodo looks and feels a lot like Facebook. You have a teacher account though, and then you create a class, and the students will register without an email. You just give them the class code. So in this particular case, I will give you this one here. This is, again, another test group. You can go in and use the group code, this FSZGPP, and that allows you to be able to log into the Realize 2015 class. And you can post things on there just like you would with Facebook. You can upload documents. You can post links. It's very visual, very interactive, and students really enjoy it. With student accounts, they also get free cloud-based storage. So the students find it's great. Instead of having to haul around a USB drive, they have free storage there for themselves. It's private. I can't see it. It's just for them. For teachers, you also have the same thing. There's a place for you to be able to hold all your documents. You can just in the library, and then you can share that between your different classes that you have. Works very well with tablet, that type of thing. But again, you can just use the web-based one as well. What do I like about Edmodo? Simplicity. I don't have to teach my students how to use it. They figure out how to use it very, very quickly. The disadvantage is it is like social media in the sense that everything that gets posted at the top pushes everything down. And so if you have anything, announcements and that type of thing, you really have to have, what I've done is put up separate groups, and I have an announcement group, and in there I put my announcements, because in that way it doesn't do it. Question for you. Do you prefer to use Edmodo over your organization's LMS for online learning? If I had the choice, yes. I don't always have the choice, and I'll tell you why. Typical LMS, like Blackboard, Moodle, and so forth, Desire to Learn, they're built from the structure that they are an academic standalone unit with a top-down type of hierarchy. So teacher controls all of the knowledge. I mean, there are wiki moments, there's discussion boards and that type of thing, but everything's tightly controlled from the teacher's side. Edmodo has a lot more of the give and take. Yes, you still have more control as a teacher, but students can really create a lot more content a lot easier. So when I say tightly controlled, Rita, I'm just saying, for example, if I have content inside my LMS as a student and I want to share that outside to someone else, that's not likely going to happen very easily unless the teacher has made allowances for that. Here's the thing, with Edmodo, they can actually share, for example, if they create something in there and they click on, they can actually share that as a shareable link with somebody outside of Edmodo. So again, it only keeps it very, very tightly controlled. The teacher has to create the class, whereas in this Edmodo, once the class is there, the students can do a lot more creation outside of that. So, using the web and then owning the resource, yes, and I do a lot of that. I use Edmodo, kind of the basics, but then I use other things like, for example, I shared a TitanPad resource with you, and I also do things like, for example, the other things that are coming up like Padlet or whatever, where they create content on their own. So moving on just to the next one, Tozzle. This will probably be new to you. It was new to me not that long ago. Tozzle is a interesting thing because it is also registration free. Once you create a Tozzle pinboard, you can have people edit it with just the password that you give them. You give them the link, you give them the password, just like I've done right here. If you follow this link and you use the Realize 15 as your password, you can actually add content to it. Tozzle's great because, again, so simple to use, and it's very visual, so much like a Pinterest type of thing, but you can upload documents, you can embed a YouTube video, you can even have a Twitter streaming thing. Advantage for learners in this situation, again, over Pinterest, no registration. So students can easily create a TOSL in class. I can have them create a TOSL without having to register for anything. Another advantage is it has more flexibility to it. For example, adding the Twitter feed and adding the documents, uploading documents or whatever. So another nice little option to you. It's free. It's actually hosted in Germany, which gets us into a little interesting hosting situation because it's not hosted in the US, and so it doesn't fall under the Patriot Act in that case. Comparing Pinterest to TOSL, Pinterest is much more visual social sharing. So if I have a pin and I want to share that pin over to someone else's Pinterest page, I can do that. So it's much more collaborative that way. But in this particular case, this is more extensive in the type of materials we can use. And again, going back to not having to have the students register for it. So yes, questions about the Patriot Act because the government access to the site. Yes. So this is what's happened in British Columbia, for example, is the privacy law here states that we cannot host identifiable student information. Or actually, this works for any public institution, so government agencies and so forth. They can't host that on a cloud-based site because of the Patriot Act. Patriot Act can then access that information, and so that breaks the privacy law within British Columbia. So that's the reason why I keep mentioning that. Basically, that act that's causing some of the issues. Yes, private. The question is, can linked classes can though? Yes, private institutions, private situations don't have that same restriction. It's only public institutions that have that. But it is something to think about. Even if it isn't, I still think about what happens when some of these students are coming from situations where they're refugees from certain countries. I want to make sure that they can feel safe that their information is not going to be picked up by somebody else outside. Just a couple more things with TOSL. I did do a couple of things. Again, this is all on the document I shared with you at the beginning. One is I just did a review on my website about it, and I also did a video introduction on that, so you can take a look at that if you want as well. Moving along because of time, we're down to about 17 minutes left. Padlet, for those who are not familiar with Padlet, I would be surprised if you hadn't at least heard of WallWisher before or Padlet, but if you haven't, that's fine. You're going to be introduced to a wonderful tool, very simple, very easy to use. I use it quite a bit in my classes for them to collaborate and share information because it works very well with phones and tablets and computers and whatever. And basically, it's very similar, another pinboard type of idea where they can upload documents and that type of thing. But unlike TOSL, where when you click on something in TOSL, other than the YouTube video in TOSL, everything else links you outside of TOSL. Padlet keeps everything inside. You can link outside if you click on another link afterwards. But when you click on something in Padlet, it opens up within Padlet. So everything's contained within one area. It's absolutely fantastic for organizing stuff, for brainstorming, for to-do lists, to collaborating and collecting documents. Well, this is one that I did for one of my classes where I just wanted to give them some places where they could read and listen at the same time. So they have the document in front of them and they could hear it being read to them. And so there's a number of links that goes off of that. And I left it open for my students to be able to add to that. When you ask the question, Desiree, about do free accounts come with any cloud storage, are you referring to all of the things I've been talking about? Because all of them are Padlet, yes. All of it's clouds. Basically, if you don't sign up, so sign up for a teacher account, but then the students, the password protected, and the students can all go in. If you don't register for Padlet, your Padlet is locked down within 24 hours and it can't be edited after that. Still available to be viewed, but you can't change it. So that's why I signed up for an account, and then I can store as many Padlets as I want, unlimited. The storage that's on Padlet itself, so each document is unlimited, but there is a limit on the size of each file that can be uploaded. I think it's 100 megabytes, I think, is the file size for each file. I have to check on that again. I get mixed up with some of these, but Padlet is a great place for just storing ideas, very visual, and can be used for things like a microblog. You can have it as what else? Trying to think of here. A listening things. You can have it set up so that you use it as a presentation tool. You can have it go slide next, next, next. So there's all sorts of ideas that happen with that. So I'm going to give you one Padlet where you can play around. I made one for the group here. And again, you can play with this. You can introduce yourself. You can post links, whatever, that type of thing there. A great place for you to just kind of test it out safely. All you have to do is, if you're on a computer, just double click anywhere in the space and put in your information. You're on a tablet or whatever, again, all you have to do is just double tap. Last one I want to talk about is WordPress. I use WordPress as opposed to some other ones. There's lots of other things out there. There's KidBlog, there's EduBlogs, there's Blogger, there's Tumblr, all sorts of different type of things like that. I particularly like WordPress because there's a few things. Number one, you can have students, if you set it up, you can give out an email to someone who'll be able to email information to WordPress, your particular blog. And so students don't have to have admin rights to the WordPress. They can actually email it in, and then I moderate whether or not it's content coming from within the class or somebody from outside the class. So then if it's from within the class, I'll post it. But if it's not, that's reasonable. Why WordPress over Blogger? It's just a personal preference, I think. Everybody has their own thing. That's totally fine. Blogger has their own thing as well. One thing I found with WordPress over Blogger is WordPress works out of the box, straight off, without having to change any settings. As I have, for example, my phone, it'll automatically adjust to the mobile version of that. So I can actually see much clearer, much easier for touch and scroll. Whereas Blogger, you have to add that function on. You have to say to do that. Why WordPress over EduBlogs? One of the things with EduBlogs is that if a student, for example, if I create something like WordPress, that's fine for class use. But if I have students using WordPress for an e-portfolio, for example, EduBlogs, it's not something that they're going to take up with them outside the class typically. They can keep it. I don't have any admin rights over that after they leave the class, so it's theirs. So again, it doesn't stay within the class. It goes with them after they leave. Yeah, there's the same thing as WordPress. It is WordPress based, so there are some advantages to both. You just kind of have to take a look at it and see the way that you would want to go about it. There are a few restrictions on EduBlogs that work, for example. This WordPress, I do have one WordPress again as an example using the links from this session. You're welcome to kind of take a look there, and you can. What I would do with this type of thing is you could post one page and then just say with comments underneath, post your links, say for things like listening or reading or whatever. So they put it in the comment box, and you can have that to be moderated or not moderated, just depending on how you feel about that. I would suggest moderation just so you don't get spam that happens there. But WordPress is very simple to use, and I use it for my own blog, so it's something that's very comfortable for me, and so I can deal with student problems quite easily. I'm used to that. So those are some of the things. So dealing with issues, what are some of the issues as we come into our last 10 minutes here? Quality of content. Talk to just a little bit about that. One of the things I do is, I'll just give you an example. I had one student who shared with me a website, a joke site, and they shared that with the rest of the students. I'm okay because they're adults. I'm not a big deal. I'm not trying to worry about too much about that of content and that type of thing, but they're adults, and I typically am a little bit more flexible on that type of thing. But one of the things I had an issue was, as far as reading material goes, it was awful because the grammar was awful. It was using a lot of way too much slang, and it just was not very well done. And I just couldn't see the value in it as a read. So what it is, I took a few examples from it and I put it up on the screen, and I just had the group discuss what they thought about each of these. What do they think about the content? What do they think about the language? How do you think it would help them in their language learning, that type of thing? We just discussed that as a group. And in the end, what we decided was we would leave it there, but the students didn't use it. I always let them just choose whatever they wanted to choose. So the inappropriate content, if there is something that's very objectionable, for example, maybe it's racist or very inflammatory to some of the groups that are in the classroom, I will pull it, just because that's not something that's I want to have displayed in the class. And I'll probably talk to the student who shared it one-on-one and just find out why they thought that. So that's just one of the things. Also, unsafe links, spam, malware, etc. Those are other things. I've had situations where they posted a site, and I know that there's a number of ads and stuff and links on the side that take them to places where they get malware. And so I've had them take those down as well too, just because for the safety reasons of the rest of the people in class. But then we discuss how can you tell if content on the screen is real content or if it's advertisement or whatever. So again, working through trying to critically analyze the material that we're dealing with. I say, oh, we're not going to do it. We take time to discuss it. So that's dealing with issues in class. I'm dealing with adults. Some of you are dealing with, and I think it's a good place for us to be able to sit down with our students and say, this is what's out there. Here's how we can evaluate it and work through it. So maybe more success than others with certain students, but it certainly is a place to start. So here's where, without asking for questions, you can post them on the side. I'm quite happy to take more questions. Trying to see if there was any links I missed. One of the things just to also mention is my presentation is available as a Google Doc presentation, and so you can go to it there. Yes, you will have access to the practice sites after the session. I don't touch them. They're yours now. So go ahead, play around with them. And yeah, hopefully if you have any questions, you can post them there. Always, you can get a hold of me on Twitter, or you can email me and get a hold of me that way. Yeah, thanks, Sherry. I did try to create kind of a sandbox place for everybody to kind of feel free to play around with it and do that type of thing. But yeah, hopefully that gives you some places to think about what you can do with your.
Nathan, if I can interject, there was just one question. There was just one question earlier. How did you create a composite link within a link? So when you directed everyone initially to your content, how did you create a link within a link? And that question was.
So that you're talking about the original link where I had the document with all the links on it, I'm thinking?
Yeah.
That actually is using something called TitanPad, which I will quickly pull up here for you. TitanPad is, if you want to think of it kind of like a scaled down version of Google Docs. It doesn't have all the fancy functions of Google Docs, but one of the nice things is it's registration free for the students. You can create a teacher account, and then you can create multiple documents within that that's password protected for the students and stuff. So that's all I did there. Yeah. And
Claudia has rephrased her question as well regarding Sketch. Do you use Sketch as well?
I have used Sketch. Again, going back into creating accounts and that type of thing. So with Evernote and Sketch and that type of thing, I try and stay away too much from having the students having to register too much or install too much. So they don't have to install Sketch and they don't have to install Evernote or whatever, that type of thing. I have no problems with it. I have none whatsoever. I think it's a valuable tool, and I think it's a great tool. But it's just for different purposes, I guess. So.
All right, and I'm not sure if you did address this, but Bonnie posed the question: how do you compare Pinterest to Tozzle?
Yeah, I just did a quick. I can get a little deeper into that. I'm not much of a Pinterest user. I just never really got into the brain way behind it, but I understand the concept behind it, and I know how it works, and I've seen some great pages and stuff. Pinterest really is a place to curate kind of links that you find outside and post them in one place, and then somebody comes along to your board and goes, ooh, I really like that, and then they put that on their board, and you can have multiple boards. that's not really what Tozzle's about. Tozzle isn't the social interaction a sharing thing like Twitter or Facebook, that type of thing, where it's a social media type thing. Tozzle is more like, I think, more like Padlet, but with a different focus. So again, it's trying to curate different things all in one pin board. They each have their different functions. The biggest thing for me is that Pinterest requires somebody to sign up with an email, sign up and register, that type of thing, whereas Tozzle doesn't. So,
great. All right.
Any other questions out there?
Were there any more questions that Nathan can answer for us?
Just bringing up the references here for people. Again, this will be on the slides if you follow that link. And it gives you a couple of things that you can work from there in regards to self-access learning. But other than that, I thank you. I thank you, Lena, for...
Well, thank you, Nathan. Fabulous content, and it's so useful to be able to access all of that after the session. So excellent. I would like to invite all of the participants to attend the Day 2 wrap-up. So here is the link if you wanted to head on over there after you exit today's workshop right now. Just a few cleanup items, certificates obviously available on the Realize website after our forum concludes today. And also wanted to continue the discussion, Tutela is always a great place to pose questions and navigate some of the answers that you're still looking for. So thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you to everyone for participating in today's workshop.
Yeah, and everybody just, again, feel free to play with any of those things, and I'll keep them up as long as you want them. All right, thanks, everybody.